All right, this is the April 7th, 2021 Oyster River Cooperative School Board meeting. Tonight we are going to begin with a public hearing on receipt of SR2 grant funding. So Dr. Morris, I don't know if that's you or Sue.
It'll be Sue.
So in your packet, I included the assurances for the SR2 funding. So one thing you need to do is allow Dr. Morse to sign those on your behalf. In my memo, I let you know that we're receiving $134,520.08 in SR2 funding. And you are required to have a public hearing before you move to accept those funds. Questions?
I had a question.
Sure.
Does approving this motion also approve this position? Because there's a position for a guidance counselor at the middle school, which I don't think we really discussed very extensively as a board. So if we approve this, does that mean we're approving the position?
I would say not necessarily. Would you, Jim, or do you?
No, this is just a recommendation that we're making, Tom, so we can have a more thorough conversation about the position on the 21st. But just to give you a sense of where we're at, going back to the issues of social emotional learning and mental health and wellness, the middle school has been operating with 3 counselors for about 8 years. It was the first year that I was here that they dropped from 4 to 3. And this is an opportunity for us to bring back a 4th counselor at the middle school in order to support the emotional needs of our students, which we know as a result of the last 13 months is pretty heavy. And I think it's a really wise use of the funds. Probably over 2 school years we would move it from grant funding to local funding, but we don't have to do it immediately because we have SR3 funds coming behind this. So we can stagger it into the local budget without causing too much distress. But for right now, I think it's a critical position. That's why we decided to put it here along with the summer school.
Al?
I was just going to make a motion to open the public hearing.
Oh, please do.
Even though there's no public there.
Second.
So I guess we have to vote on that, right? So
Yeah.
All in favor of opening the public hearing? 7 in favor, student rep in favor. The public hearing is open. Any questions or comments from the public or from the board? Al?
I'd like to make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second by Brian. All those in favor? 7 in favor, student rep in favor. The public hearing is closed. So do we want to, let's see.
We got to approve.
We want to go ahead and address this right now. So is there a motion to authorize Dr. Morse to sign and agree to the program assurances and accept the grant?
So moved.
Moved by Brian. Second by Denise. Discussion?
So again, to approve this doesn't necessarily approve the position. It
Right.
has
The
to be
program
separate.
assurances are the terms of the grant,
Okay.
not the
Okay.
proposed expenses associated with it.
Okay.
All right. Other questions? All those in favor? 7 in favor, student representative in favor, and the motion's approved.
Thank you.
All right. We will go, next thing is the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
I'll second that. Any corrections or additions?
Could I just do the student representative report before we discuss the all-in plan, just because I think that would be probably beneficial to the conversation we'll have about that.
Absolutely. With that change, any other discussion there? All those in favor of approving the agenda as modified? 7 in favor, student representative in favor, the agenda is approved. It's time for public comments. Is there anybody who would like to make a public comment tonight? No? All right. The next order of business is the approval of the minutes, starting with the February 24th minutes. Denise?
I'll make a motion to approve the February 24th regular meeting minutes. No, additional.
Workshop.
It's actually the workshop, sorry. It's the workshop, February 24th workshop.
I'll second.
Second by Brian, or Dan, sorry. Any discussion? Yes.
Yeah, I have a correction on page 4, or an addition, I should say. At the bottom of the page, under my comment, Denise Day asked the people listening at home to not write to the school board, but to write to the governor. I would like to add, if they did not agree with the timeline for the opening. I think that was the only one for that one.
Dan?
Be talking into my mic.
Just to Denise's point, I think we need to make it clearer that this is a workshop and not a meeting. So if we could change it to school board workshop. I don't even know if we need the word additional.
That's true.
Lexi, you have that?
This is the 24th.
I thought that, is that, am I correct? Is that,
I believe
we
the
did-
24th is a meeting.
oh, okay.
That was a meeting that was called on
the
short notice
emergency
because of the
Oh, okay.
executive.
Okay,
So it
okay.
was a regular, it wasn't the workshop.
It was not a regular meeting because it wasn't on a regular cycle, but it was,
Withdrawn.
UC.
Wendy, I'll send you these on page 5. UC Terrell made a motion to state that we as a district have already moved forward with the hybrid model after vetting options at the elementary, middle, and high schools and choosing the one-day model with more synchronous time in the middle school. We would also send parents a survey with options. It's the existing is just a little bit gibberish. So that's what I'll send to you.
Could you read that one more time, please?
UC Terrell made a motion to state that we as a district have already moved forward with hybrid models after vetting options at the elementary, middle, and high schools and choosing the one-day model with more synchronous time for the middle school. We would also send parents a survey with options.
All right, we ready to vote on the February 24th minutes? All in favor of the February 24th minutes as amended? 7 in favor, 2 represent in favor. Those are approved. The March 10th workshop minutes. I'll move approval of the March 10th.
Second.
Second by UC. Any additions or corrections to that?
Not to that one, no.
UC?
March 10th, page 2, UC Terrell, the current wording says, be able to have conversations without being vetted to an idea. It was wedded to an idea.
A little different.
All right. Dan?
So, yeah, this is a workshop, therefore,
This
this
is a
one.
workshop.
Yes, this one, I'd like to change the heading to school board workshop instead of additional meeting minutes. Workshop meeting minutes.
Workshop meeting minutes.
Good.
Others? All those in favor of approval of the workshop meeting minutes for March 10th as adjusted? Please raise your hand. 7 in favor, student rep in favor, those are approved. And the March 17th. Denise,
I'll make that motion to approve the March 17th regular meeting minutes.
moved by Denise. I'll second that.
And then
Denise?
I do have a correction, I believe, on page 2 in terms of the vote. So I did not abstain from the vote for myself for vice chair. And I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the vote should have been 4-3 with Brian, Tom, and UC? No? Voting,
I think it was 5.
because I know I did not abstain. I know I definitely
So I think it was
voted for
5-2
myself.
I went back and actually watched the video to make sure that we got this right. So for chair, my suggestion is to strike where it begins, where the vote is 2 to 4 to 1, and say voting results were 2 in favor with Tom Newkirk and Brian Cisneros in favor. And
Wait a
then,
minute, I'm sorry,
Oh.
hold on, where you're on the first page?
I'm on I'm sorry, yes, I was
Oh, okay, I
on the
got
first
it.
page,
Yep.
the first bolded paragraph, 2 in favor with Tom Newkirk and Brian Cisneros. And then the next paragraph, voting results were 4 in favor with Dan Klein, UC Terrell, Al Halland, and Michael Williams in favor. And then after that, add that Denise Day abstained. So that's the chair portion. And then for the vice chair, Michael Williams asked for a vote for Denise chair. For vice chair, voting results were 4, and then from that point, I would say in favor with Dan Klein, UC Terrell, Al Howland, and Denise Day in favor. And then I would add, after Michael Williams stated this was a majority and we did not need an additional vote, Michael Williams, Tom Newkirk, and Brian Cisneros did not vote as a majority had already been declared.
Oh, okay.
So that's what I would like to suggest for clarifying that. And
that right?
I can email this. I sent it to Wendy, but I'll yeah.
I just had 2 name corrections on page 3.
Yes.
It's Liz, that I've sent to Wendy. It's Liz Whaley, W-H-A-L-E-Y, and it's Dean Roger Ritvo from UNH. So
That's an
Wendy has
important
those.
correction, thank you, yeah. UC,
Correction on page 5, it says UC Terrell suggested making April 20th an asynchronous day combined with a remote day. The clarification is UC Terrell suggested making April 20th a remote day with teachers planning backup asynchronous lessons in case they are out sick.
okay.
So all of you are sending those corrections to Sue? Thank you.
All right. Others? With those corrections, all those in favor of approving the March 17th minutes? 7 in favor, student representative in favor, those are approved. All right, announcements, commendations, and comments from the district? And from the board? All right, we will move on to the unanimous consent agenda. Is there any request to remove anything from the unanimous consent agenda?
Yes, well, let me see, I had, and then, yeah, I think I would like to take the motion to approve Friday, June 18th out of the unanimous consent agenda, because I think I'd like to have the conversation about school reopening first.
Okay. We will move that to the discussion and action items below. Anything else? All right, I will move to approve the rest of the unanimous consent agenda, which includes the motion to nominate and approve non-continuing contract professional staff members as submitted by the superintendent, motion to approve list of high school and middle school spring coaches, motion to approve high school and middle school activity stipend positions, and motion to approve the list of policies for second read and adoption, which are JLCJ, concussions and head injuries, GEA, hiring of coaches, and DGA, authorized signatures.
I'll second.
All right, second by Denise. All those in favor of approving the unanimous consent agenda? 7 in favor, student rep in favor. That's approved. All right. Megan, would you like to start off?
Yeah, sure. So it's kind of funny because we had that meeting, or we had the workshop, and at it, Dr. Morse mentioned that we probably wouldn't be getting a mandate from the governor, and then I think it was the next night that we got a mandate from the governor. So that definitely caught me off guard, and I'm sure it caught a lot of us off guard, including students. And so I think the biggest thing that I just really want to emphasize tonight, and this is why I asked to speak, was the students feel strongly about advocating for Wednesdays and having the Wednesday relearning day. And I haven't read the governor's mandate like myself, word for word, but I think I've heard that the mandate does leave some room for interpretation with what a all-in 5-day schedule would look like, meaning that we could rework that Wednesday to be something that is as close to a relearning day as we can possibly get it while still meeting the governor's ordinance. So what I would really like to stress is that students feel very strongly, I think in all three levels, the elementary, middle, and high school, can all kind of agree that this Wednesday relearning day is really important for various reasons. Some students use it to get extra help. Some students use it to participate in clubs and activities. Some students use it to just catch up because, you know, this is a very weird year and things aren't normal, and we kind of need that extra day in the middle of the week to take a breath and kind of make sure that we can finish the week off strong and, of course, finish the year off strong. So if nothing else, I mean, I think that the students really want that to be considered, and so that's what I'm here to advocate for tonight. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Megan. Assistant Superintendent?
I just have a couple of things I wanted to mention. Last Thursday, the REACH program registration opened, and actually it was amazing. We had, within 24 hours, 60% of the camp slots were full, and now I think we're about 85% full across the board. Rachel Gazowski from Durham Parks and Rec is also, they're doing the afternoon program. That program filled within the first 24 hours, and they are looking to try to expand capacity to try to meet the need. One of the things that happened literally 24 hours before we opened registration was UNH announced that Camp Wildcat and other programming for the summer was not happening. So clearly we're filling a pretty substantial demand. We had a meeting over at Mastway this afternoon to take a look at the site and figure out what we could do to expand our capacity, because obviously we want to meet that need. Rachel is in the process of trying to expand staffing to be able to expand the afternoon program, and we're looking to add a few camps here and there where we can to accommodate those numbers. But it's an exciting thing, because it's clear that a lot of our families are really raring and ready to go and get out and get their kids involved. And it's so anyway, like I said, we had about 85% full, so there's still slots, but just and we're working as fast as we can to expand. There is a waiting list for people who want to wait, and some of those we'll be able to accommodate, we hope. So that's one thing that's really good news. Second thing I just wanted to mention, another on April 19th, we have the second round of our vaccination clinics for staff. And I just found out this afternoon that we're going to be able to offer on April 17th a vaccination clinic for our high school age students. So we'll be able to run that clinic on Saturday the 17th. Sorry, Andy Lathrop, because it will disrupt a little bit the sports schedule on that day, but we'll figure that out. It will be a closed pod that will include Oyster River, Barrington, Somersworth, and a few other private schools in Stratford County. So it'll be a really good opportunity for families of 16 years and older to get their kids vaccinated. As just a public service announcement, they opened the portal up on April 2nd for 16-year-olds to register to get the shot. So you can do it that way too. But, again, best thing that could happen is to get everybody vaccinated, because that's really important for us heading back into school.
So that's really, really exciting that we'll have that opportunity here on April 17th. I know this is hot off the presses, but should students and families expect to hear from the district in terms of how to participate in that?
Yes, again, it's hot off the presses, so I haven't had a chance to have some of the conversations I need to have, but there should be a survey coming out tomorrow to all students in the 16 and older, asking if we have a clinic, will they participate so that they can arrange the vaccine. For those of you who aren't vaccine nerds like me, Pfizer is the only one that's been approved for 16, 17, 18-year-olds. So it's a little more restrictive in terms of, because it doesn't keep as long. So it's very important that they have an accurate count before they do it. So there will be a survey coming out very soon to ask people to commit to it. And then there'll be a flyer coming out from Stratford County Regional Health once they have pinned down all the details. But it is an exciting opportunity for our community. So.
And so because that's a closed pod, folks can't go on to Vinny and
No, all they have to do is be one
that.
of the groups that has been identified as being eligible, and we're in the process of trying to figure out how we're going to be able to vet that with our staff. It was pretty easy. We just had to have a principal from each school standing at the entry point and say, okay, yep, you work for me, yep, you work for me. That was easy. It'll be a little harder with students, but the one thing I would emphasize is parents have to be present when their kid is getting the shot. There is no ifs, ands, or buts. If you're a minor, you have to have a parent physically present when the shot is being delivered. So, yeah.
Does that include 18-year-olds?
Anybody who is a student in the Oyster River School District or any of the schools that are included in this pod would be eligible.
No, does the needing a parent present?
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah. If you're 18, no, if you're 18, you're 18. You don't.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Yep. Denise?
As far as showing who's a student, do all the schools have student IDs? Because if they have student IDs, could they bring their student ID?
Yeah, we'll sort that out. I mean, certainly Oyster River does, although given that it's been a pandemic and pictures were done sporadically in the fall, not everybody has one of those. So we'll figure something out. It's a solvable problem. It's just some of those logistical details need to be figured out. The most important thing for people to know is April 17th will be a day for Oyster River, Barrington, and Somersworth, as well as a bunch of other private schools to get vaccinated at Oyster River High School. So keep your eyes open for more details.
Thank you very much. Dr. Morse?
Thank you, Michael. Before I go into my report, I really want to commend Todd and Rachel. I'm on the town side in the town rec program. You know, we started REACH 9 years ago. It was just an idea that we kind of fumbled and bubbled with as an experiment. And in the time that Todd's been in charge of this program and Rachel's been on the town side, it's been a very robust program, and it really wouldn't be as robust if it wasn't for the town of Durham and for the efforts of Todd in particular to make this program what it is today. And the fact that it filled up so quickly obviously is a product of pent-up demand by parents and trying to find something productive for their children to do in the summertime. So I would just really want to do a shout out to the town of Durham as well as Todd's efforts. And then secondly, I want to do a shout out to Todd because we started talking about a closed pod for our kids with Stratford County a week ago Friday. And every day, Todd called them and said, what's the latest? What's the latest? What's the latest? And they'd say, oh, we'll get back to you. We're really close. We just need some guidance. And so it's really due to Todd's tenaciousness that we're able to offer a closed pod on site for our children. And I really think that's an exciting opportunity. So that information will be coming out as soon as we have it. So I just wanted to take the moment to say thank you to Todd publicly. In terms of where we are in the assistant superintendent search, you can now see why it's going to be so hard to replace Todd. We had 22 applications. We're screening those applications. I have a small screening committee, and we'll bring it down to 5 or 6 people. I have Wendy setting up a organizational meeting next week with the big committee that will do the interviews, and we'll set up interviews the following week. So, you know, we're right on target for the timeline that I put out there. We had some really good applications, and we're going straight ahead. Everything's going well. I'm going to ask.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
It's going to be one night, or in the interviews, it's going to be one night or 2 nights? Or
2 nights.
2 nights. Okay.
Yeah, we'll have one night for organizational purposes because we have to do it on Zoom, so it'll be a little funky. And then we'll do 2 nights of interviews on Zoom, and then I'll do on-site interviews with the 2 finalists and interview them as I take them through the district, and I'll be ready for a nomination on the first meeting of May.
So the 2 nights where we interview, those haven't been set up yet, though?
They'll be the week after next.
Yeah, but you don't know which nights?
No, Wendy's doing a survey.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. It looks like, I mean, from what I can see, Tom, it looks like it'll be a Tuesday, Wednesday, but we'll finalize that in the next week. She sent out a survey today to find out what's the best day for an organizational meeting on Monday or Tuesday, so
Okay,
we'll
thanks.
see where that plays out. Brian asked several weeks ago for an update on where we were on COVID travel guidelines, so I'll ask Catherine to go to the podium and give us the update on where we are on this.
Hi there. I think you all have the PowerPoint back up in your, with your materials tonight. Do you want me to project it, or is everyone okay with your backup?
Why don't you project it, sir?
Project it? Okay.
Yeah, I'm not actually seeing.
Good for the community to see, Catherine.
Oh, okay.
Oh, it's, on the screen. I thought she meant paper, but, yeah, okay. Nope, I have that one. that one.
Wrong side, sorry.
Plus, we always need this.
Alexander, are you laughing at me back there? I want to go in.
For the record, the answer was no.
Now everybody's laughing at me.
No.
There, maybe. Okay. All right, so,
We lost it, Catherine?
It
Oh,
just-
it's back.
just starting up. So, Brian had asked about this, and we met just when we had updated the guidelines. I think you all probably remember Dr. Morse talking about then there was another change. And so we needed to go back to our nursing department and then also our governance committee. And we had some really hard discussions about changes we were proposing to make because the CDC hadn't caught up yet. Now, the CDC has caught up with most of this at this point, but the state definitely moved forward with changing their guidelines before CDC did. And our goal with this is really to be in line with the state of New Hampshire at this time, the DHHS guidelines, for several reasons. One is they did look to data to make some of these decisions. The other piece around this is looking at implementing these guidelines now prior to going all in so that we can monitor these guidelines and make adjustments if needed with the current population of students we have. So our nursing staff has been operating under these guidelines, and we're paying very close attention to any issues we may see so that we can address those now. And if we need to make changes or become a little bit more strict in one area again, we have time to do that as we go. So in terms of travel, as most people probably know, there is no required quarantine for domestic travel at this time. And they do stress that they want us to still follow the CDC travel guidance about wearing a mask when you're traveling, practicing social distancing when you're traveling, getting tested 3 to 5 days after you've traveled with a molecular or PCR-based test, and limiting public interactions after travel. And so because we have structured learning environments, we can control for some of those public interactions, if you will, because we have required social distancing in our schools. If it's international travel, you do still have to self-quarantine for 10 days after the last date, or if you travel by cruise ship. So that is the same. The exceptions are up there, as you can see under bullet 3. Of course, if you've had your vaccination series, so whether it's been Pfizer, 2 weeks past your Pfizer second dose, your Moderna second dose, and then your J&J 1 dose, you are exempt from the international travel quarantine. In addition, if you have are within the 90 days of the prior SARS-CoV-2 infection, then again, you are not subject to the travel quarantine for international travel. In terms of contact tracing has shifted for the state to 3 feet, so we have started implementing that as well. Even though we are still at 6 feet currently, we are contact tracing at 3 feet. Quarantine periods, these have shifted to 10 days for presumed or confirmed positive. Now, we had held on to 14 days for several weeks after DHHS changed this guideline. They changed, this was one of their bigger changes earlier on. We kept 14 days, and we have now shifted to that based on the data and research they've presented. In addition, if deemed a primary contact, testing at day 7 after exposure and ending your quarantine after day 10. So again, that used to be the 14. And again, if somebody is positive in the home, instead of being quarantined for the 24 days, it's now 20 because of those other adjustments in the timelines. The other big piece to our update is regarding siblings, or if you're a staff member with your children that attend our school in our district. So we've written those out pretty explicitly. We are allowing siblings in. So if a student or staff has an exposure but they're asymptomatic, the siblings or staff can come in. If the student or staff is symptomatic with no exposure, risk factor or travel, the siblings can come in. So they might have a runny nose, the sibling at this time, but we're going to allow for them to go through the proper protocol to get a test and that kind of thing before we deem the sibling out as well. And that is in line with DHHS guidelines. In addition, if the student or staff becomes positive, the student stays home. So we're really looking at risk factors here, and that's very important. So it is taking more time for our nurses because they're looking at these risk factors. If we know that somebody was with a group of students who has a confirmed positive, if they had traveled, these are a couple of the risk factors that they're monitoring so we can make really solid, good decisions. But we have seen, obviously, as we've talked before, we have not seen the level of, at this time, classroom transmission. That data, again, has been published. However, we are closely monitoring it because the recent information we're seeing on the variant is concerning. So we are continuing to monitor that information to see if that variant, not only because it's more contagious, therefore puts our students at risk if there's any classroom transmission, but we're going to make sure we're on top of that.
Thank you for putting this together. I know when I asked it, it was like shooting a moving target. So I appreciate you taking the time to work with the nurses, and this nursing staff has been phenomenal, as have you and your staff. But so just hypothetically, for the people listening at home, if a student, is ready to go to college in the fall and they want to go visit that college today, they can do that.
Yes.
And not have to quarantine when they come back.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, so we just actually had some people return now from, a spur-of-the-moment vacation that came up, and they contacted our nurses and said, we've just traveled, and they walked them through this new guidance, and so they went over risk factors with them as well and encouragement around, again, you should not be gathering, in unstructured settings. Getting testing is still important, even though you're not required to quarantine, because at that 3 to 5 day mark, that is still recommended. That will give your family some really important information about whether or not you brought anything home with you.
Thank you.
So I'm curious about the contact tracing from 6 feet to 3 feet. It seems like even if the 3 feet were the threshold we used for asking somebody to quarantine, knowing who else might have been close enough in the 6 feet radius seems like it would be useful information for parents to make their own decisions or whatever, even if the district is not proactively taking action. Can you talk a little bit more about the
Sure.
rationale there?
So DHHS changed that guideline. They changed it to 3 feet. So what we decided was we are going to be in line with all of DHHS guidelines for several reasons. It's become increasingly difficult because as we remained really steady and tight, all these other changes were coming and we're losing track of, okay, so DHHS says this, CDC says this, our guidelines say this. So we committed to all of the guidelines that were published by DHHS, which included the 3 feet. So I don't think that nurses are not looking at what's a potential greater impact in this, especially, so lunchtime is staying at 6 feet, right? So at 6 feet, that is still in place. So that's in there in the guidelines as well, because we're not reducing to 3 feet for lunchtime, because you're unmasked, so you're staying at 6 feet. So there are situations where they're looking at the risk, athletics and those kinds of things. They're still looking at the level of risk that's involved. But 3 feet is what DHHS published.
I would also add, Michael, that us holding to a higher standard has caused our nurses to have to work a lot harder because parents are pushing back in terms of what DHHS says versus what we were saying. And so it really became very difficult for our nurses to maintain the standard when other school systems around us had already gone to the DHHS standards. So it's not that we're not committed to the safety of the kids, but we have to be consistent with, what the state is putting out there because it has become problematic for our nurses to deal with the difference.
Yeah, I think we were part of a pool of schools that was kind of doing some similar things, and we've sort of become one of the last ones standing with holding on to some of these more stricter guidelines. And with that, the nurses are taking a lot of verbal aggression at times when people are dissatisfied, and we really need to remove that from their work. They are here to help keep our students and staff very safe and work with families and to try and create the lowest risk environment possible and working with their task force, and we really need them focusing on that versus 6 calls of just, unhealthy conversations. And so we're really trying to be more proactive at this time and make those healthy conversations and how to say, okay, you did travel, so here's the way we're going to work together to make sure that we mitigate risk and that everyone's going to be at the lowest risk. And so that's more the conversation now. We're trying to shift that. And I do think that will be beneficial for, for our nursing department and our staff. But we are going to monitor this. We've been very clear about if we start to see any funky transmission, if we're seeing something beyond 10 days on a regular basis in terms of, positive, if someone's coming up positive, then we'll monitor that and we'll adjust if we have to.
And the updated travel and quarantine guidance is already on the website, if folks want to read the whole thing.
Yep.
Line by line.
Yep, I uploaded it last week. So if you go onto the district website under COVID-19, you'll see the new pre-entry questionnaire, which was also updated, as well as the district's health and safety guidelines. There's staff safety guidelines for how they interact during the school day and how they set up their classrooms. And then there's our school health procedures, school health office procedures, so you can kind of also see how our nurses are working through situations. All that's right there.
Yeah, great.
Yep.
Other questions for Catherine?
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
So the next conversation we'll have is about where we stand in terms of the bringing students back. So first of all, let me just say that as part of this process, we have met with the teachers union, the guild, and we have successfully negotiated an agreement. The reason that I can't put it in front of you tonight is that the leadership of the guild has to present it to the membership. That should happen this week, and then we'll get a report back from them, and hopefully it'll be on our agenda on the 21st for your review. But so that's one piece of bringing the children back. Obviously, at last workshop, we talked about the governor's order. We were on a process of bringing the children back on May 3rd. The governor preempted that with an executive order requesting that all students return to school on April 19th. I know that you have been seeing reports around the state from various school systems that the arbitrary nature of the order really makes it difficult for many school systems. And I'll just give the straight why it's difficult for us. The second Moderna vaccine for 750 plus employees of our district and Barrington School District, as well as the rec programs in the towns, as well as the licensed early child care providers. They all received their first dose, and April 19th was set up as the second dose. And that was very deliberate because it would have allowed 14 days for our staff to come back on May 3rd. So it was no accident that it was on April 19th. So I have written to the commissioner, and I know that he has carried that message to the governor, and I've sent you copies of it, that we will not be able to open school on the 19th. We don't have a choice. The vaccine is time sensitive, and you had already approved a workshop day so that our staff could be vaccinated. And my recommendation is that we stay the course. The next problem we have is that according to Stratford County Public Health, we can expect somewhere in the nature of 20% of the adults who receive the second vaccination being sick. Now, that's a statistical model. It could be higher, it could be lower, but that's the model that they shared with us. And if we have 20% of our staff and faculty missing, we can't run school. If we sent the kids to school, we wouldn't have enough bodies to supervise them, and they very simply wouldn't be in classes. They would be in holding space. And I know for all those people who want the children in school, they want them in school to learn, not to just be in a collection point where a bunch of grown-ups can supervise them. And so we had talked about the 20th being an asynchronous day, and so I absolutely hope that the board continues to go that course as well. I literally would be in a situation that I couldn't run school if that number of people are out. And that gets us to the 21st, and what we know in some cases is that the second vaccination is pretty debilitating for people. It's possible that a number of staff would continue to be sick into Wednesday. And then when I analyzed the executive order, and I sent this to you as well, the executive order still allows this body to make decisions related to COVID. So I know that some of my peers across the state are literally standing in defiance of the governor. That is not my position. I'm not recommending that we defy the governor, but the governor did not know that we had a vaccination on the 19th when he made his decision. And we know the impact of that on adults after the fact. And then when we hit Wednesday, just as another piece of information, Suzanne had set up at the high school our PSATs. So in a normal school year, the way that Suzanne does this is that she has what I would call event programming for our freshmen and juniors and seniors. But because we're in COVID times, that really isn't possible. Event programming would be, bringing the kids in for, various programs, bystander training or other issues of importance that the high school does annually. So we are coming into Wednesday, and the plan was to bring in the kids, the sophomores, for the PSAT. So it really makes sense strategically to think about the 19th and 20th as we have been thinking about it. But in terms of Wednesday, we couldn't run the high school anyway, and it may be better for us to be thinking about that being an asynchronous day and making Thursday the first official day that we bring back all of our students who want to come back. I know that's not what some people are hoping, but we have to be realistic about what we can accomplish, and that also provides a level of certainty to parents. When I was thinking about Wednesday, I just was talking out loud to Michael, and I was saying, well, one way I could do Wednesday is call it like a snow day and see how many people call in sick because of the second day. But then when, I calculated in the issue of the PSATs, it just kind of makes sense for the predictability of parents that they know what it is to expect from us. So that's really where I am on the calendar. And again, I'm not going out of my way to defy the governor. These are real issues that we had in play before he made this announcement. And based on my interpretation of his executive order, you have the authority to make different decisions. The language I believe he put in there was the local school board could make decisions that impacted 48 hours without going back and asking for permission. So That's the first part, Michael. Do you want me to keep going, or do you want to stop there? And, because you had other questions from the workshop, and,
Let's pause for questions
Okay.
there, and then we'll move forward after that. So, Tom?
If you'd have Wednesday just for the PSAT, would the elementary and middle school go in normally?
we could try that. So my big concern is I don't know how many people will be sick on Wednesday. So that's what I was kind of talking out loud to Michael about. If we considered it a snow day, I could watch and see, have David, Misty, and Jay report to me the night before how many people are calling in that they can't come to work because they're still ill from the shot. And then, I could make a call based on that information. Conversely, we could just make a call tonight saying it's another asynchronous day, and then parents can plan accordingly.
Denise?
Yeah, I mean, as much as I know that parents want kids, or many parents want their kids back in school, I, just speaking of myself, I had my second shot, and I would not have wanted to have, now we're talking brand new, having all the kids in, like as the first, a day after I had my shot, or even 2 days after I had my shot, to really do something that was new and taxing and all that sort of thing. I think that would be terribly unfair to our faculty and to our students, because they deserve to be ready to go and not be like, and thinking of the kids like, oh, tomorrow's my first day back, I'm going in all in, oh no, we have to cancel. I don't think that's really the right thing for anyone. So I am in complete favor of staying the course. And I guess my only question is, if we do that, if we go ahead and vote to stay the course and have the 19th be a professional development day, followed by the 20th and 21st as asynchronous days, what happens if the commissioner comes back and says that it was denied? I mean, what kind of position does that put us in?
It doesn't put you in any particular position. I did ask a lawyer this question, and he said it would be a misdemeanor, and I would be subject to a $1,000 fine or up to a year in jail. So it doesn't have any impact on the school board, but you can all visit me if that's what happens. I do, even though we haven't had any official response, I can tell you unofficially that the commissioner has been very understanding of our circumstance, and he actually advocated, and I saw the email that he sent to the governor on our behalf, and so the commissioner has been trying really hard to work with us in particular, because he knows that we're in a real bind in terms of the vaccine. We can't reschedule that, and so I don't have anything but praise for the commissioner tonight in terms of him trying to do what's right by us, but we have not heard officially that the governor will support it, but I really do believe that the way the governor wrote the executive order, that you are within your authority.
Okay, and then I just have one other follow-up, which is, I assume that Suzanne has enough staff, even worst-case scenario, to support the PSAT in terms of what they need for.
Yeah, so.
Don't fall off the stage.
Yes, we do have enough staff. We're working on that right now to determine how we're going, where we're going to have students take the test as far as space and numbers of students, to ensure that we have the staffing that we need on Wednesday.
Brian?
One of the saving graces I think we have is that there's a lot of schools in the same situation that are waiting for their second shot in that time frame. I mean, my district is as well, but we're already in 5 days, so it's not affecting us as much, but I think and from hearing Frank over the last few weeks, this is not as strict as the last one as far as they're allowing a little more leeway, and I think they understand that this, the idea was great, but the timing was not, so I think they understand that they kind of sprung it relatively quickly, and having it the week before April vacation was kind of an odd thing too, but they, I I feel that there's a little more leeway in this one as far as there's a lot of schools that are saying, hey, we still have our second shot to go. Can we get a little leeway here? And I think they are to get it done because they're all doing it during the day. So I'm not as worried about you getting thrown in jail as much as you are.
I'm not either, but that's what the lawyer told me.
We just got to get that assistant superintendent job going.
Lucy.
The 19th and 20th, no-brainers. I do have questions about the Wednesday, particularly at the elementary and middle levels. And I think the fact that there's vacation week the next week is playing into this. And the reason for that is that if we only came back on Thursday, the kids would be out for 5 days with the weekend, and then they'd have 2 days of school, and then they'd be out for another 9 days. And so the opportunity to have at least 3 days before you're away seems better for me from the child's perspective, especially, and we know that on average 20% have, as I'm understanding it, not only side effects, but side effects significant enough to not be able to come to work.
The 20% is about significant side effects,
Right.
not about, have a headache. It's debilitating.
And so I wonder what that would mean for the Wednesday. I didn't know about the PSATs and what other options we would have there, but perhaps for especially the elementary students where instructional time and time with their teachers is important. I guess I would just put that out to others to consider at the elementary and middle levels, what that Wednesday could look like.
All right. Do you want to proceed with the follow-up from the previous meeting?
Sure. So obviously, going back to Megan's report, one of the pieces that you asked of me was and it was Dan, I think specifically, who kind of honed in on this, is what's the advantage and disadvantage of having Wednesdays as a relearning day or not having Wednesdays as a relearning day. Well, as it happens, when I came in on Thursday morning, I jumped on that particular issue right away, and so that was in your packet, and I leave it to the body to decide whether they want to resurrect it per Megan's thoughts. You had specific questions about music, and Jay has been working really tirelessly with the music staff. I had a email today from a university professor who also is a community member advocating for an in-person experience, and Jay has been working on that issue. In order for us to have an in-person experience, we needed to buy specialized PPE for our young musicians. And Jay, if you want to step to the podium and pick this up, that would be great. But it was about $3,000, and it's really specific to the instruments that generate spit. And so I'll turn it over.
Yeah, great. I've been working very closely with all the music staff, particularly Jericho Olberg, who leads our music department K through 12. So we actually have a running joke now. We have a daily meeting at 10 a.m. when she's free, and we talk about a variety of different things, positive things about getting the kids back, and we're planning and we're looking forward to how the kids come back, and they will be participating in music. We have outdoor spaces that we will use. We also have 2 district buses. I've worked with Lisa closely in terms of this. So if we needed to transport PE and music students up to use the high school facilities, particularly outside spaces. So I'll say this, my music staff are very enthused to be back working with students in person. Any questions about that?
I think Megan has a question.
This isn't a question, but to the point about music, if there are any student musicians, this is a little plug for MOR's Coffee House. We will be having singers and musicians. I think it's the 22nd. So they can reach out to Madla Walsh, and I think that includes middle school students as well. So if they would like to come and perform, or if any of you would like to come and perform at Coffee House.
Is that an in-person?
Yeah, it's in person.
Oh.
It's going to be outside in the courtyard.
Okay.
Musicians will be underneath the tent that just got put up in the courtyard. I don't know if any of you have seen that, but the tent finally got put up, and then everybody else will be spaced out on the courtyard in the grass in front of that. So yeah.
What time is that?
It'll be 7 to 9. There's going to be, so there's limited seating. There will be 50 tickets, and tickets will be on sale soon. They're working out a way to set up a form so that we can make sure students can get their names on the list.
So Suzanne is not taking up a seat. If certain people wanted to listen to that, they could do it from the lawn, right?
Yes, we have limited capacity. I mean, there's about 50 tickets that can get sold from the lawn, so that's our capacity, and
Okay.
for the kids. If people are interested in coming that are not students, and yeah, I mean, I'd love to have everybody come, but we don't have the space.
I was just thinking about me, Suzanne, so.
You are more than
You know how I always want to get to some. I'd be glad to. Thank you, Megan. And then, stay there, Jay, because we got world language.
Yep.
So again, these issues that our administrators are resolving are literally resolving them on the fly and working with our staff. And so initially, we thought that we would not be able to have direct instruction from our world language teachers. And that's really based on the fact that in any given class, we have kids taking Chinese, we have kids taking French, and kids taking Spanish. And in order for our world language staff to teach them, they have to break up and they they compound our problem for contact tracing. But again, Jay met with his world language staff and he came up with a pretty good solution. So Jay?
Sure, we're going to cohort by team. So what that means is students will go to their appropriate world language teacher, whether that be Chinese, Spanish, or French, and they'll do that on team. So if a student has a Spanish teacher, obviously they'll go see Professor Dunn on team in a team area classroom. So the world language teachers will travel to students, and students then will travel to their appropriate world language teacher. So the cohort now would be by team.
And the transfer of kids is happening all within the first floor, so kids aren't running up and down the stairs. The worst case scenario is that should COVID become a problem, it could wipe out a team. It won't wipe out the whole school. Based on what we're seeing internally, knock on wood, COVID is not rearing its ugly face inside the school system. We've been monitoring that very carefully, Catherine and the nurses, and we do that report every single week. So it's just, we're measuring the advantage, the content advantage to the children versus the risk. And we just felt in the end that this was absolutely worth doing. Jay kept on pounding into my head. We're looking for the best solution for the kids in world language, and it's not keeping them on a computer, it's exposing them to their teacher. So credit to Jay's tenacity in relation to this issue.
I would add, too, I did consult with our nurses. This just isn't me saying, oh, this is what we want to do. I consulted closely with our nursing staff, and Catherine was a big help with that as well, so, and others. So we created a plan that we felt comfortable with. Again, it's about the experience for our students.
And one more thing, and Suzanne, I think this one, both you and Jay should be up because the other issue that we were trying to deal with, especially with the loss, the potential loss of Relearning Wednesdays, is how we would be able to interact directly with our remote kids, give them an advantage that they will lose when we go all in. And so both Jay and Suzanne came up with the idea of creating a remote office hour specifically for our remote kids at the end of every instructional day. So one of the, going back to Dan's request, one of the disadvantages of losing Wednesdays is we also are losing our ability to support our remote learners the way that we have been. And when we lose that, we have to figure out other ways that we'll connect with those students. And, I don't want to mislead the board because, the fact that both of them have figured this out is truly amazing, but it doesn't replace the quality of time that we've had. It is it's the ability to take a master schedule and, look at ways that we can advantage different student groups. And Suzanne and Jay, if you just want to explain how you've added remote office hours.
So we're going to have remote office hours daily from 2:35 to 3:05, so there'll be a half an hour. And again, this isn't going to be something random. Our expectation is that if we feel a remote student needs some extra help, teachers will be reaching out to set up appointments with those students. So that will be daily from 2:35 to 3:05. We also will be working with our schedule, particularly I'll speak for the middle school. Like during Bobcat times, we'll also be having remote experiences for students in the unified arts as well as music classes. So I'm working closely with those teachers to make sure we provide those experiences. And please know those teachers are enthused and they want to make sure they continue to provide those experiences for our remote students.
And then Suzanne, I want to shift the conversation to you. In addition to the remote model that you and Jay put in the afternoon, the question that the board asked is, what would Wednesday look like? And if you could just talk more specifically about that. And I'll just tell the board that Wednesdays is still a work in progress. This is a concept, not the final version, because she continues to try to refine it to advantage the kids.
So we have a few ideas that the faculty are working with right now for Wednesdays. The faculty continue to be concerned about remote learners, even with the half hour at the end of the day. There is some concern about being able to access teachers because the other parts in the school day when there are office hours, the faculty will be working with the in-person students. So Wednesdays, we have a couple of schedules that we're working with right now. One that where the kids would run through sort of a super Bobcat day, which I know that some people have experienced. It's a quick day. Classes are short, but kids have access to all their teachers throughout the entire day. To have 4 lunches with the super Bobcat day means that classes will be around 35 minutes long. And lunches are 30 minutes long. And so that means to have 4 lunches, with the way that our bell schedule works is because of the way the kids move in the high school, it's not like you can just pull one group of kids and put them in lunch and have a period meeting because they're all crossing over every period. So you have to block off time to be able to ensure that all the kids get lunch, all the faculty get lunch. So if we do this, if one of the ideas behind the schedule is to have all the classes meet and have lunch in the middle of the day where there's office hours or advisory offsetting the 4 lunches. That's a lot of time. It's about, 4 30-minute lunches, so it's a significant amount of time. The other thought that is going around is how can we have that 35-minute classes from 8 and just stream them through, and then use the afternoon for additional office hours where teachers can meet with the remote learners, and the students would leave that don't need to meet with the faculty. So there's a few ideas being thrown around by the faculty. I just want to publicly thank Brendan Whalen and Lisa Hallback for the work that they've done on our schedule, and the faculty for really working together to find a daily schedule that will work for students and for faculty and maximize contact time and instructional for kids. So we're continuing to work on Wednesday to find the best possible solution for a Wednesday. It's very difficult to rotate in another blue or white day because it throws off all of our services. And so to have a schedule that just rotates through makes it really challenging for people that have already made a lot of adjustments, and for CTE kids.
And, we're used to David and Misty coordinating what they're doing, and it works very well because they're basically supervising the same grade levels. But I do want to say that Jay and Suzanne also have been working very closely together on a lot of these issues because of the busing situation is really imperative to how we operate the K-4 and 512 units. And so I'm just going to transition to Todd, and we're going to talk a little bit more about busing. We've made a minor tweak to what we shared with you last week, but it really does advantage the remote learning period, and it also advantages us in terms of keeping time frames close to what people have been used to.
Okay. So just to understand the variables we're working with, first of all, Lisa Huppy is amazing in terms of her ability to see all of the permutations and variables. And so I just have to commend her for, number one, not letting her head explode when we keep coming at her with all of these differences, but most importantly, to be able to zero in and kind of problem solve this. So that's one big positive variable we have. In terms of planning bus routes, just something to keep in mind, we have basically 16 buses and 16 vans. And so what we're trying to do with our bus schedules to minimize the amount of crossover between different buildings and levels is to try to dedicate bus runs to individual schools as much as we can. So to the extent possible, we are trying to have bus runs that be just Mastway, and another set of bus runs that's just Mohammed, and then we'll have the middle school, high school will have to be combined, but it minimizes the mixing of all of those groups. And given that we have some limitations on how many kids we want to put on a bus, that makes things challenging. So in order to do that, what we realized as we began to plan this out was that there's windows of time you need between each run to be able to schedule the buses. And so you need a minimum of 40 minutes between the middle school and high school runs to be able to bring the kids home on the route and then arrive at the next location to start the next round of runs. So when we originally published the start and end times, it was a preliminary idea, and we had published that the middle and high school would start at 8 and end at 2:40, and that the elementaries would start at 9:05 and end at 3:35. What we quickly realized was that particularly the PM time of 3:35 at the elementary schools, if you didn't start dismissing until then, it effectively meant that staff at the two elementary schools would be on duty, if you will, until probably 3:45, if not closer to 4 o'clock. And so Lisa was very quick to be able to look at and make some adjustments. And the solution was to start the afternoon bus runs earlier from the middle and the high school, in order to free them up earlier to get to the elementary schools. So what does that mean right now? We are sticking with the 8 o'clock start time at the middle and high school, but they will have a 2:35 end time. Okay, so it's 5 minutes earlier. At the elementary level, the start time will become 8:55, and the end time is 3:25. Okay, basically what that allows to have happen is that the kids are picked up at the middle school in the afternoon, and in the high school they switch, and it takes about 8 minutes from the time the first pickup takes place at the middle or high school until all of the middle school, high school runs are gone. So they're leaving by 2:43. Takes 40 minutes to do their runs and get to the elementary schools, so that they're arriving at the elementary schools right about 3:25, so that they can then dismiss the elementary schools. And because all of the buses are dedicated to either Mastway or Mohammed, all the kids can be dismissed at the same time, which is actually a positive compared to in the past. Because of the waves, we've had to dismiss kids a few at a time, and there's this sort of extended period of dismissal. Now it'll be one round of dismissal, and the hope, and I say it that way because please understand that it's just like the first day of school. We can't guarantee anything until we actually do it. But the hope is that the last kids would leave the elementary schools by 3:30, 3:35 at the latest, assuming that that all works out. And so due to the willingness of the Guild to work with us to kind of talk it through, and Lisa's brilliance in seeing this all and being able to piece it together, we were able to come up with a solution that I think is agreeable to everybody. The school day remains the same length of time. I take that back. It remains the same at the elementary. The middle school, high school day is 5 minutes shorter. But again, we are putting that 30-minute remote learning time at the end of the day, the office hours on the end of the middle school, high school day. So teachers will be effectively there until 3:05 anyway. So I'd be happy to take any questions about that because I know that's a lot of information.
We've actually given you a lot of information and the responses that we've given, Michael, and that really completes, I think, all the questions the board had from the workshop. So we're willing to answer questions of anyone about any of the topics we put out there.
All right, Denise.
I'm just wondering if, in terms of the logistics of, again, surveying parents and determining, hard and fast, because obviously you surveyed them the first time, it was not binding. Now you really, because it's 2 weeks, not even, to try and so I'm just wondering when the expected deadline to get that information back from the parents will be.
Well, I would tell you, Misty and David are ready last week, was it? Yeah. So they have, in fact, they might be sending it as I speak. So we definitely immediately reaching out to families to confirm that information. You're absolutely right that Lisa needs to know absolutely who's going to be riding the buses to actually finalize these routes. So right now we're operating in the realm of theory and we need to confirm that. So we will be surveying families immediately at the K-4 level and we'll be doing something similar with middle school and high school very shortly as well. So our hope is to have all that information to Lisa by Monday so she can begin to plan those things.
Dr. Morse mentioned last week the density concerns on the bus were not as dire as we originally thought. That's great news. If there are families, though, that are on the fence, sort of 6 of one, half dozen of the other, of bringing their students to school or having them get themselves to school versus having them ride the bus, does it advantage the district for them to take care of their own transportation at this point?
Absolutely. Every school system dealing with the executive order is having the same issue, and that's busing. So even with the information we have to date, we thought we'd be right about 29 on the elementary and about 31 on the middle school, high school. We won't be following social distancing, even though the buses are, probably 35 to 40% full. It's a contained box on wheels, and really there's no way of providing a social distancing. We will still be expecting masks, and the bus drivers will still be circulating fresh air through the buses by keeping the windows open. But any parent who has the capacity and willingness to transport their own child will be a big help on the system. And we'll make that clear in the survey that even though we're talking about 3-foot distancing in a classroom and 6 foot at lunch and 8 to 10 feet on band and chorus, on the bus, there's no such animal. I mean, the way we've run to date, we've had 1 child per seat. We won't be able to accomplish that the minute that we bring in this number of kids. But we also won't be putting 77 kids on a bus either. So it's the best we can do, and I think in a normal year we would be encouraging parents to use the bus system, but in this particular year, parents can transport their own children. That's a big help.
In that vein of a PSA, at the middle school level, there will be a bike skills workshop on April 24th. Jay had sent out that email. There'll be another one. So for any middle schoolers who are interested in, families who are interested in their children riding to school, there's also neighborhood groups that are considering escorted pods of students riding their bikes to the middle school. So keep an eye out for that, middle school families.
Very good. Thank you.
So it seems to me the question we have is that with the governor's order, it clearly allows, I think, Monday and Tuesday without any kind of permission to go ahead because of the vaccination. The Wednesday then becomes a question whether we're going to use Wednesday for, I guess, the PSAT, but keep the middle school and elementary school asynchronous, or whether we want some other model. So it seems to me that's kind of the crucial decision. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
And just to, as the wheels turning, it doesn't seem that other high schoolers could be at school on the Wednesday because of the PSAT, but that could be a remote day. So we could, at the most extreme, we could say elementary and middle are in person, and high school is remote.
Denise?
I won't support a vote to have Wednesday be a all-in day because, again, I just think that's not fair to our teachers, it's not fair to our kids, because, kids, even at the elementary level, oh, good, I'm going in tomorrow, I'm going to get to meet everybody, all my other new friends, and then they have to cancel because that teacher is sick. Or having a teacher who's not quite feeling 100% yet, but feeling pressure to go in, I just don't think it's fair. So I'm going to, if that's the way, I'm just not going to support that particular day as being an all-in. I understand, we all want the kids in. We've wanted the kids in all along. We've tried to do it the right way in the best interest of our entire community. And so for myself, that's, to me, is planning that Wednesday is an asynchronous day. Everybody knows what's happening. It takes the pressure off.
Megan?
And to speak to that, if we did have the in-person Wednesday day, I know at least for the high school, students, would like to have the relearning day, but I think especially having something like a Super Bobcat day, there are benefits to having days where you go to all your classes, but when we're in a block schedule and students are used to 80-minute periods, having periods of, 45, 50 minutes, and, not, I'm not sure how exactly the long the periods would be, but those days definitely feel very rushed and you're not able to get as much material in. So if we're advocating for Wednesdays as it's a day that it's an extra day of students to learn, it's really going to be difficult for teachers to actually fit an extensive amount of curriculum into that Wednesday that would make it sufficient and comparable to a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, or Friday, just because of the schedule, at least at the high school. And at the middle school and elementary school, I know that's different, but I just think that's important to point out too.
What do others think about the 21st? I am hearing Denise's thoughts, and they make sense also, so I'm curious what others think.
I support being in on Wednesday.
Being in on Wednesday?
So I'm conflicted. So I think I'm trying to follow what the governor is trying to make us do, which is to go in on Wednesday, which I think leads to a really painful thing, which is going to be the snow day. I think that really we're going to have to, in my opinion, this is one of those that we're going to have to assess. It's really great to plan for when you're sick. Unfortunately, in this case, I think what we really need to do is that on Tuesday, find out what's happening with the staff, how many are sick, and how many can come in, and then we make a decision based on that. I know it's not the best solution, but I think that follows more of the intent of what the governor's order is.
Puts us less at risk, because we have the 48 hours that the order allows. Anything outside of that, you start pushing the envelope.
I guess the 48 hours to me is the 20th and the 21st, because the 19th is a professional development day. The governor, the Department of Ed has never said when school districts have to have their professional development days. It's a planned professional development day. So to me, the 19th doesn't count as the 48-hour emergency, because it's a planned professional development day. All schools have professional development days. Ours just happened to fall on the 19th. That's the way I look at it. So really, the 48 hours to me would cover the 20th and the 21st.
I think my sense is that we really want the first day that we invite all the students in at the same time to be successful and to be smooth and to not be chaotic. And the best chance of having that happen is to have that first day be the Thursday.
I agree. I mean, like Al said, I'm super conflicted because, we've made a concerted effort to do this as best we can the right way. And we are now forced to sort of backtrack and rush and do things on a timetable that's outside of our control. So, I think Dr. Moore said it very well, that our desire is to do what we know is best and also, meet the demands of the order, right? Balancing those comes with sacrifice. And, although it makes sense on the one hand to plan for Wednesday and then sort of have an escape hatch that, okay, we have an X number of staff unavailable. At this point, with all we've been through, the last thing I want is to sort of plan for uncertainty. And so I think that's sort of what I hear in what Michael just said. If we can plan for something with a degree of certainty, I think we should do it. And that's what sort of pushes me to the start on Thursday side.
What about the idea I raised a few weeks ago about having it a remote day and having teachers plan for an asynchronous backup? The advantages there are it doesn't say, this is our first day back, this is the exciting day that needs to go flawlessly. It's probably an anticlimactic day because even students who have been in person end up being remote. But it is some instruction time. It makes for 3 days that week instead of 2 days. It doesn't require extra substitutes because if there's a teacher who's out, I don't know what the curve is. If it's another 20% of the 20%, then that's 4%, right, of the teachers that would be out that day. So 4% of classes would flip to asynchronous, but you wouldn't need to shut down the entire school or to have kids in a holding cell. You would just have those kids switching over to do their asynchronous assignment for the day. It seems like that might have the, no one's thrilled with hours looking at a screen, particularly for those who have just started going back in school more often, but it keeps that 3 days for that week, and it holds instructional time while offering teachers flexibility.
So I would just ask David to react to that, Yossi, because, operationally, I'm sure that he has an opinion.
It's a really good question, you see, about what we can do with our students. From the elementary perspective, we're talking the first day of school again on that Wednesday or that Thursday. Every process has to be reviewed and practiced with students. Kids aren't going, we've talked about this a lot at our workshops. The point of coming back, even before the executive order, was to transition kids back to a full day. And we talked about how academics would, in many ways, take a back seat to those SEL issues, those transitions. And if you think about the beginning of school in a normal school year, kids don't, at the elementary level, come in and on day one have 60 minutes of math and 90 minutes of language arts. They do get-to-know-you activities. They do the processes. They figure out how to get a drink from the water fountain. And this year, they've had, as hybrid kids, they've had to learn one way to get a drink during a 12-person or 8-person classroom. And now that size is doubling and we're going to 3 feet, that process has to totally change. And that has to be taught to kindergartners through 4th graders and practiced. And so that's what would be happening on our first day. And so my perspective on that would be we would want all of our teachers there. I was a teacher for 16 years and I was pretty good at it, but you don't want me being a sub for your student on that first day when their teacher should be the one doing that. To do it remotely, is very challenging.
It wouldn't be a full day remote. It would be holding over from the half-day model.
Well, then we have a day of, I don't know what really, because we're transitioning to a full-day model. And so if we're preparing our students for asynchronous work on those days, if we're doing a hybrid day, I guess I can't really speak to that. That's also not in part of the order. So I guess I can't speak to if you're going to, as a board, decide to have hybrid days, then we have to have our teachers who are transitioning and then flipping classes go back and create their hybrid schedules for the day and then do a whole new switch just for the next day. That just adds yet another thing that we would have to then plan and do and set up and make sure our students have their devices when they're going to be in school. It just ends up being a really long process. So I guess I can't speak, I'm flummoxed now a little bit, you see. I don't know how to speak to if you're going to decide to have an additional hybrid day. We've not had Wednesday hybrid days. That was a piece of the conversation even before we talked about going fully in. And we have a number of I don't know how families would react to all of a sudden having a remote synchronous schedule for half a day on a Wednesday when they have yet to have one of those.
A single Wednesday, that's true.
Correct. So that would be my first, as I think through that out loud, that would be my first thought, boy, that's going to be yet another big switch for little children who then won't ever have that happen again. So that doesn't have the consistency that we like to build in for our students. I think on balance, every conversation we've had has ultimately had the struggle of saying we want our kids in school, and yet there are all these other things on the other side. And this is one of those. On balance, having day one start on Thursday and having students have something they've been used to on Wednesday happen on Wednesday is where I would land. That's a more consistent experience for our students.
This makes sense at the,
Go ahead, that's it.
at the elementary level. It seems that the middle school and the high schoolers have more recently had the full remote experience. And so I wonder if that could be at the middle and high school, not as a, as a Wednesday day, but as a day that there is school.
Oh, well, I'm not qualified to talk about that at all, but from an elementary perspective, that's what I got for you.
I mean, the hard part about this, what you're leaving out, is that we're trying to it's not like, in a perfect world, of course I would say, Thursday, why would you go through all this madness for a day? It doesn't make any sense. The reason that I was conflicted, it has nothing to do with me. It has to do with the governor ordering and maybe having to send care packages to Jim in jail. But it's like, that's the difficulty around this table, is like, because educationally, I think it's really clear that we would do Thursday, Friday. And again, like trying to plan, if we weren't being vaccinated, it would also be easier because we wouldn't have this uncertainty of 20%. And so we're placed in what's obviously a pretty bad situation.
If this was a random week in the middle of the year, I would tell you we could totally staff the teachers who would be absent. I can cover a class, our paraeducators, we can all do that, and we do that all the time. But this is exceptionally unique because it would be, at the elementary level, at least for us, day one. And that's a wholly different experience, and we want our students to be calm and loved and happy and understand what's going on. So that's what I would say.
As far as the high school is concerned, it is the start of a new school year for us also. So I would say we've gone through just as many transitions and had just as, probably more so than elementary at this point. It's up to you to decide how you'd like for us to use Wednesday. If we did have classes on Wednesday, it would be a Super Bobcat Day. It would be a remote Super Bobcat Day of some kind, which means kids would be shifting through all of their teachers remotely. I'm not really sure what the benefit of that would be. I think that given the proximity to vacation and the use of Wednesdays right now, kids are meeting with teachers on Wednesdays. They are reassessing on Wednesdays. They are doing all of that. I had one teacher tell me she had 12 appointments one Wednesday morning with students. So that time is instructional time. I don't want anyone to think that kids are not utilizing that time. Kids are reassessing and taking tests and doing other things, and Megan can probably speak to that also. So we could have that day on Wednesday if you'd like for us to do that, whatever that schedule is that we determine as a remote Super Bobcat Day. But that means the kids would be shifting remotely from one class to the other versus being in person and doing that with teachers. So
Suzanne, what happens if we have a significant number of absences in terms of kids shifting through classes? There would be nobody there to greet them. Is that not true?
there would be no one there to greet them because the rest of us would be those of us that would be able to sit in and be able to access those classes would be administering the PSATs, to be honest. I mean, admin's going to be administering the PSATs, counseling will be in the PSATs, we'll be doing that. And so the leadership is really who does that typically in the past. That's who's taken attendance and done those things with the remote class, fully remote classes. And we would not be able to do that. And we wouldn't be able to be available to teachers to know when they're, covering those classes has to happen. It would happen that morning, and we would be greeting the 10th graders. So it's possible that a student could show up and the teacher would have a note or something there for the kids, letting them know if they're not feeling up for that. It's hard to predict. So.
Megan, other questions? Stay.
Oh, no, it's not, I mean, it's just a general question for anyone. It was just about, so the discussion is about the starting on a Wednesday or a Thursday, and it's because of the language of the governor's order, but would having a remote day satisfy the governor's order, or is he saying, I want to start an all-in on Wednesday? Okay, so then we would have to be in person
All the variations
on
of Wednesday. Would,
Okay.
If we don't take Denise's interpretation, which I actually think is the right interpretation, the professional development day was situated there for the vaccine. It's been there, and the governor, he was aware when he made his order, but he didn't take it into consideration. So I think that the 48 hours away, I would look at it as Tuesday and Wednesday as well.
And
I take that in, but the reason that I'm asking is from the student perspective, not from the.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to clarify.
I have a question, Suzanne, about the Wednesdays regularly. What are the downsides of simply, I know that we don't want to keep a blue, white, blue, white, blue, blue, because then it flips it the following week. What are the drawbacks of switching weeks? So one week Wednesday is blue, the next week Wednesday is white, and
so we've talked about that at task force, and the faculty have talked about that also, and that in the type of year that it is with the 6 weeks, it's going to be very challenging or 7 weeks, it's going to be very challenging to ensure that the instruction and the curriculum that you're planning is able to move forward, because there's multiple sections of the same. So it's just going to cause some adjusting and readjusting that they haven't planned for. And there's some other, there's also services that our students are receiving on Wednesdays as part of their plans, their IEPs, and 504s. There are services that kids are receiving, and so we would need to pull kids out of classes to be able to ensure that those services are being met, and we really don't want to do that. We really don't want to pull kids from classes to make sure that their services are being met. So we're trying to find a way to build in time within the day that students would be able to get the services that they need that would not impact them in their access to the classes.
I see. And for this particular Wednesday, the 21st that we're talking about, couldn't we simply say it's going to be a blue day or a white day?
Again, that would be fine. I don't know if I have we could do that. Again, the balance that's going to be a balance issue. That means you have an additional whatever day it is, which is fine. We can faculty can work around that curricularly, but I don't know if I'll have the staff to be able to do that. I mean, someone could show up for we've never done that I mean, the only days on Wednesdays when we do that is if we're missing a Monday, then we shift the whole week over. We've done that so that we don't miss it, so that on days where we haven't had a Monday at school because there's a holiday, we've shifted that Monday to Tuesday. So it's been a Tuesday, Wednesday, blue, white, Thursday, Friday, blue, white. But we've never just had a random day unless it's not planned, like a snow day or something like that, that we lose the day. So faculty would have to plan for that with their curriculum, and they would also, there's no guarantee that they would be available for the 80-minute period, just because of whether or not they're well or not, and I wouldn't be able to cover that.
And it will be complicated by needing to have certain faculty administering and administrators administering the PSAT at the same time.
Yes. We wouldn't be able to cover that because anyone who would be available would be administering the PSATs, the sophomores.
Denise and
And also, what would end up happening is if it was a blue day or a white day, those students who are sophomores would be missing that class.
Yes.
So that would be the other thing that would happen, so.
I was wondering if I could just make a motion then that we move to we move to the all-in models on Thursday, April 22nd, with the exception of the sophomores going in for the PSATs on the Wednesday, because that would still be right.
Yes, all the sophomores that are.
Okay, that's the motion I'd like to make.
Denise.
I will second that.
Moved by Tom, seconded by Denise. Any further discussion on the motion?
Question, if I do think that the middle school, so I agree that the first all-in day would be Thursday. If I think that there should be remote option on Wednesday, or a remote, that there would be a remote default unless teachers were sick and sort of switch to the asynchronous lesson plan for that day. Would it be a no on this vote?
I think that would either be an amendment to this motion or a separate motion after this.
I think you want to make it as an amendment, because if this one passes, you wouldn't be able to make the motion, because this was one, you would have to have that motion be pulled back. And I think you're trying to make an amendment, you see, don't you, Michael? That would be the clearest way.
Sure.
All right, I'd like to make an amendment to this motion. So the all-in day would be, would start, all-in in-person day would start on Thursday, the 22nd. In addition, Wednesday would be asynchronous for the elementaries, default to remote for middle school and high school, with teachers developing asynchronous backups to implement if they are unable to come to work that day.
So we have a proposed amendment moved by UC. I don't see a second.
Okay.
So we're back to the motion that Tom proposed to begin full in-person option starting on Thursday, April 22nd, with the exception of the sophomores getting to take the PSAT on the day before. Other discussion? All right, then I'm going to call for a vote. All in favor, raise your hand. 6 in favor. Student rep in favor. All opposed? 1 opposed. All right.
And to clarify, these are simply, this is not adding days to the end of the school year.
Right. There's not adding.
It's asynchronous.
All right. Dr. Morris, anything else in your?
I think I do want to say it here. I was going to wait until Denise and Yusi had a chance to talk about last night's anti-racism work. But I feel compelled to share it at this point, and they can do also during their board report. We invited our Asian American families to a meeting about a week ago. Just a really wonderful group of people. And as a result of that meeting, we had representation for the first time from our Asian American community. And it was probably one of the most moving meetings that we've had. Our valedictorian from 3 years ago is an MIT student, and mother was on our committee last night. Name?
Yan Hong Dai, who is also the middle school PTO treasurer.
Yeah. And she was sharing what happened to her daughter in Cambridge while she was shopping. And it was one of those people who got in your face and screamed, "Go back to the country you came from." And her daughter, of course, is American, so she is in the country she came from. And it just shook me up. And as I talked to others today who participated, it was one of those moments where you really felt your heart being ripped out of your chest. And I want to say that, you know, we talked a little bit about this when UC reported out, but the racism that's going on in this country for no reason other than for somebody's facial features or the color of their skin, and how devastating this is to families across this country, that they can't feel safe walking in a neighborhood as affluent as Cambridge or as rough and tumble as South LA, is really an atrocious situation we're in this country. And I cannot tell you how proud I am of our district and the leadership role that we've taken. And, you know, as a result of that conversation, we're in the process of organizing a forum for our Asian American community on the 25th of May. I just really wanted to share that tonight because they are, like all of the people of color in this country, are standing up to just unbridled hatred for no reason whatsoever. And every one of the Asian Americans shared their positive experience here in Durham, their positive experience on the campus, and how appreciative they were of this school system and the education that we're providing their children. So probably a little personal privilege there, but I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you, Dr. Morse. All right, we move forward to Finance Committee report. And this is more of a preview than a report.
So it's hard to believe, you know, but back in January, we actually put a charge for the Finance Committee, and we really asked to look at two things. The first was we knew we were going to hire a bunch of paraprofessionals, and we were kind of wondering where the money was going to come from. And then the second part, it's really tempting to think how great it is that you passed next year's budget, but we really wanted to finish off this budget. And so the second part of our charge really was looking at, we had said that we were going to give a $400,000 back to the communities from the fund balance, and then what would we do if we were short or if we were ahead. And so when we last met, we really thought that about right now would be where we clarified where the fund balance really was, and we would know what some of the warrants had passed, and we would begin to get an idea of the state of the union. And I think that's where we're at right now. And so we've set up a meeting, I think it's next week. So we will then go over what the state of the union is, and my thought really is to bring back a recommendation, explain where we are, and bring back a recommendation of where we think the money should be distributed. So that's what the memo I put out there was. So that's, you know, who's on the Finance Committee we'll get to as we get to the committee recommendations, but that would be the first part. If the Finance Committee goes forward, my thought really would be after we've taken and closed out this budget, really to kind of think about what we did well, what we maybe didn't do so well in terms of the budget process, and begin to put together a timeline for, this is shocking to think about this, the budget process for the fall.
So part of this is in the spirit of giving the full board a preview of what the Finance Committee is going to be chewing on next week. The other thing that's in the materials for tonight was a draft Finance Committee charge. And so one of the discussions that not tonight, but down the road, will be, do we extend that charge for the Finance Committee or make it a standing committee? So I had written this up and assumed that we wanted to share it with the full board, but that we would let the Finance Committee chew on it as a part of its proposal to what it would do as a standing committee. So that's mostly for information. If you have thoughts you want to share on that tonight, please do so. If you have thoughts that you want to share on that after tonight, please send them to Dr. Morse or to Sue for the Finance Committee to consider. Questions or comments for Al or the Finance Committee? And that committee is meeting at 6 o'clock next Wednesday, right here.
Just want to keep that Wednesday streak going.
Straight through from February break
No rest.
to April break. Yep. All right. Thank you, Al. Sue.
So speaking of the budget for '21, I've given you an update, and we have a very healthy budget right now. Next week, I will bring more information to the Finance Committee about what that balance will be, and we can talk about what obligations we'll meet, and if we have other funds, what we might do with them. Any questions?
Thank you, Sue.
Okay, thanks.
And Megan, you covered Wednesdays in great detail. Was there anything else that you wanted to share tonight?
Well, I already mentioned that MOR will be having the first in-person coffee house, so that's very exciting for the high school. The high school is also having a lot of events coming up, including right now, I don't know if you all know, but April is Assassin Month, so I currently have a water gun with me right now, just in case anyone tries to get me outside of this meeting. But that's going on, so students are very excited about that. And then we'll be having the Masquerade Under the Stars, we'll be having the graduation, and then some other events as well. And I mean, I anticipate that this end of the year, for as crazy as a year it's been, will be a very fun time for students. So I'm really happy to report that everything seems to be looking good.
And you have college news.
And yeah, personally, I decided to go. I'm going to UNH next year. So
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
thank you.
Congratulations.
Well,
Yes.
so just as a side, congratulations. It's funny because on Facebook there was a student from UNH who was posting, they do surveys every once in a while, and this student was saying that they had an internship and was asking for, folks to fill out the survey. And it was, people might remember this name, Caroline Wilson. And she's a senior. And I was like, man, that was 4 years that went by. So I'll look forward to seeing something from you in 4 years.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, my comment, I think, especially the cool thing about Todd arranging that pod is that when you look forward to graduation, it's like, it's going to be a different thing when most of the seniors will be vaccinated. It'll make it a much more comfortable setting.
No, students are definitely, I've seen a lot of students getting vaccinated now, and I think everybody I know has at least signed up, juniors, seniors, even the sophomores that are eligible. So there's definitely a huge push within the OHS community for everybody to get their vaccinations so that we can have a fun summer.
Absolutely, and just in a little side note in relation to the grandstand and thinking about graduation, the latest word is that the parts will be on site April 20th. And within 3 weeks, it should be up. So that's really exciting news, and it'll get used a lot by underclassmen, the middle school music program, and the seniors. So I think that couldn't come fast enough.
All right, moving on to discussion items and actions. We had separated the last day of school from the unanimous consent agenda. Can we take that up now?
Yeah, so just a question about that, because the reason I asked for it to be pulled out was just in case the vote with the asynchronous days, but because they're school days, they're just asynchronous, we don't have to be concerned with extending the last day of school to the 21st, okay.
All right. So Dr. Morse, you're proposing, recommending June 18th as the last day of school?
Yes, Friday the 18th. I think the parents are waiting for that vote so they can start planning accordingly.
All right.
All right. Well, I'll make that motion then, that the last day of school be Friday, June 18th.
I will second, Brian seconds that. Any discussion? All those in favor? 7 in favor, student rep in favor. The last day of school is June 18th, 2021. All right. School board committee assignment requests. So you have in your packet a proposal for some really very small adjustments to committee membership. You'll see the changes in blue, thanks to Wendy. So Tom would be moving from the negotiations committee to the sabbatical committee. The instructional models committee has concluded its work and goes off the list. Asking Brian to join the negotiations committee, and I guess that's it. Yeah. So this is my recommendation to the board and requires your agreement, I believe.
Motion to approve the committee assignments as presented.
Second.
Thank you. Motion by Tom, second by Yussi. Other questions, comments? All right. All in favor, please raise your hand. 7 in favor, student rep in favor. As Dr. Morris noted earlier, we will not be taking up the Guild MOA tonight. We'll take that up after the Guild has had their vote on it. And so we are down to policies.
All right. So for policies, I would actually ask that policy ACA racism be taken off for first read for tonight. Some changes were made, and unfortunately our policy committee meeting is only tomorrow night, so policy committee actually didn't have a chance to go over the proposed changes. So we would like to have that opportunity to do that in policy committee tomorrow, and then we would bring that policy for first read at our next board meeting. And certainly if anyone had any, feedback to give us, you could send that to Dr. Morse. And as I said, we'll be meeting tomorrow. So as long as that is all right with everyone. As far as the other list of policies, BBAA, School Board Member Authority, BCA, School Board Member Ethics, and BDD, Board Member Ethics was actually taken off also. That, I believe Wendy sent the email out this afternoon, because that one also isn't ready to come for first read. So it would be BBAA, School Board Member Authority, BDD, Board Superintendent Relationships, and then BEDB and R1, the agenda preparation format and agenda requests. And I don't know if anyone has any suggestions for any
Can I add,
changes to those?
Denise?
I know I have a couple.
Yep, if I could just add.
Yep.
These are policies actually belong to the board as opposed to management, and that's why they're in front of you. You wanted to make some adjustments to the agenda format, and you wanted to add a process for each of you to make a request and know that Michael and Denise would make sure it gets addressed at some point in a future agenda, and it also serves a purpose related to something that Dan has said many times, which is how do we hang on to things? We have meetings and we say, we'd like to talk about that sometime, and then there's no record of getting back to it. And so we got lots of feedback from board members related to how to do that. And if I could just hit on that, Denise, if that's okay. So there was a difference in opinion about the board agenda item request in terms of whether it should be a really detailed proposal or whether it should be a mechanism for board members to be able to say, I'd like to talk about this in the future. Here's a brief paragraph about why I think it's important. And it versus going down through a very litigious kind of looking, overwhelming kind of format that might discourage somebody from putting something in front of the chair and vice chair. And so we tried to craft something that reflected that intent without getting it into a place where it would become onerous for a board member to go forward. And the place where a legal opinion, if there's something that somebody puts in, and there needs to be one, that would be me chasing after that, not board members, because you're volunteers and that's what you pay me to do. And if there's a financial implication, I would sit with Sue and we would outline if there was a financial implication. Trying to make this something that's workable for the 7 of you without making it a burden on the 7 of you. So I just wanted to share that, Michael.
Looks good to me.
When I first saw the previous draft version of this form, I actually was thinking that it would be not just for the board to use, but for staff to use as well. So that if something that was coming to the board that needed some explanation, that this would be a nice way to summarize the highlights.
Yep, we could actually use this. That's a great idea, Michael. But obviously, we'd put probably more meat behind it because we have the facility to do that. But I just wanted to make sure that we didn't turn people off from making requests.
I mean, the whole, I mean, again, I think you don't want it to be onerous, but what you really want is when somebody picks up the packet and reads through it, they get a sense of the flow of what you're actually supposed to accomplish in the meeting, and the material is there. So, I mean, again, it doesn't have to be a 50-page, thing, but you have to set a minimum where you actually have the basic stuff to formulate a discussion off of. And so, I mean, I looked at it, that looks good to me.
Thanks, Al. The only other thing that I would add is to make sure that, and again, this goes back to the many times that Dan has talked at this body about losing track of things, is I would have Wendy create a spreadsheet, if you will, of the request, and Michael, in this case, Michael and Denise's deliberation as to where they would place it, and we would put that spreadsheet in your packet, every week, so that you'd always know, okay, well, my item is coming up on the 21st, or my item is coming up on the first meeting of Wednesday, so you wouldn't be pondering, gee, we gave this to the chair and vice chair, and we have no idea how it's being deliberated or when it's going to be deliberated, sort of trying to bring it back to a full circle. So I think that would be an important piece of it, and I really want to thank Dan, because he's only pounded in my head on this issue probably for 3 years. How do we maintain record of requests? And I think this document and associated spreadsheet will really do that.
Losing track of things is something at which I am an expert. So.
That's one of the things my daughter told me today, yeah.
I think that in terms of financial implications, I think that there are times when you'll have something you want to propose, or we haven't talked about, say foreign language, and you don't know, and I don't think you should have to go very far down that road. I mean, are you going to have it start at the 5th grade? You're going to have 5th grade in elementary. You're going to have 1 to 2. You're not going to know. How much would you have to pay for a foreign language teacher? So I think you should be encouraged. Like if I guess I think that if that makes sense, but I don't think you should feel like you need to go down that road, because then I think as you discuss it, then those things are going to come forward from the people who know what those numbers are. So
I guess I would think that would depend on the nature of the topic, right? So if in the example that you gave where we're starting a discussion about something that's down the road, it's wide open, I think, at the beginning. But if it's something specific, like, hypothetically, building a grandstand that wasn't in the budget, then that's very clear and present and
so maybe
something that we need to know about.
Maybe the amendment would be, instead of if any in parentheses, it would be if known.
If known.
Right. So if you have an idea of what the financial implications might be, you can add it or present it, and then if not, then the process of exploration determines it.
Or at least, when you may not know, but when you wrote up your proposal, say this would require speaking to Sue or speaking to somebody else. So it gives you some, rather than just a vague thing, what's your roadmap, kind of, how are you going to address this?
Yeah.
I appreciate that this process and the resources behind it will, more than having a single line in the agenda, help us understand what's being discussed. When I first read this, I was concerned that when we think about the arc of any decision, right, part of the beginning is that we have some sense of what each other are thinking. And when I joined the board and I first asked, how do you get something on the agenda? Someone gave the advice that what Kenny would do is during the board comment, he would say, I'm thinking about this, and let's get it on, maybe we can talk about it in the future. And so I would hope that in parallel to this, to this bureaucracy or this process for doing it, that we can continue to be open and early about some of the things that are on our mind. Because if Al says, I'm thinking about this, and I'm going to submit it as an agenda request, then I can also say, hey, that's making me think about this, and also suggest it at the same time. And that way we get a step ahead. We have a richer conversation when we actually have the conversation than if one person is just submitting in a vacuum.
Denise?
There were just a couple things. First of all, as far as the form we had talked about in the policy committee, having a question about, is this addressing a current policy? So I don't know if that's something
I think that's really important, Denise, because it's a policy-making body, so if it references back to a policy, that would be super helpful, because then we could actually present the policy along with the item. I think that's a great idea.
Right, yeah, because we had talked about, so just adding that, is this addressing a current policy? And then I just had two very simple changes on the actual policy itself. The first one is in the second paragraph where it says, every board member has the authority to request an item to be added to the agenda. The process is doing so is outlined in BED BR1. The chair, vice chair, there's two in, so it's just a typo. So we just need to just cross out one of those ends. So that was it for that one. And then at the next one down actually, where it says the agenda will be distributed to board members, the media, we don't really, do we still distribute agenda items to the media? I just didn't know if...
I don't know whether Wendy does that or not.
Yeah. I mean, maybe in the old days with Foster's.
Yeah, for sure we did, when Foster's used to cover us, but...
Yeah, so that, that, I don't know whether we want that in or not, but...
Denise, can you back up to where you saw the typo?
The typo was the paragraph, it's the second paragraph down where it starts, every board member has the authority. The second sentence, it says the chair, vice chair, in consultation. So it's just, just a minor.
The chair and vice chair.
Chair and vice chair in consultation.
Yeah, in consultation, right.
And vice chair.
And then the last one was at the very bottom, not the very last paragraph, the one right before that, but where it says, all additions, deletions, and changes to the agenda must be approved by a majority vote of the board members present and voting, and if approved, will then be added. This part is actually talking about adding an agenda item to that night's meeting. So it's not future, it should just say, that will then be added to the meeting.
Yeah, and I would just throw out there that is never a good idea unless we're in a situation of an emergency.
No, that's like when we've had, I guess we don't, I'm trying to think of an example, but this whole bottom section is talking about additions and adjustments to the agenda during that night's meeting. So just to be consistent, I know what you're saying, we don't generally add agenda items to that night, but that whole paragraph, that's what it's talking about.
Right.
We need to have that ability to...
Yes.
We've done it, yeah.
I was going to say, I can't think of an example, but I know we've done it before.
Sorry, Brian, yeah.
Since we're talking about the agenda policy and how it's set up and the RDoc that goes with it, I think we should, and I would recommend this, at least for discussion, is take the unanimous consent agenda and bring it to the end, because I'm noticing what's happening a lot is we're pulling stuff out of there that is being discussed later. And it would probably just be easier to have it discussed and then leave it in the consent agenda without having to pull it out and just say, all right, let's do it all in one fill. I know Lee does that at their select board meetings. So it's at the end. So if you want to, if it's been discussed and you get to the end and you just take it all in the consent agenda.
The only reason I would maybe think about not doing that is if there are people who are not going to stay, not from the board, but from the support staff that don't know if an item is going to be discussed or not until the end. They don't know if we're going to separate it or not. I guess they're just staying until we do it. I do like the intent, though, because we do struggle with how do we make sure that the important stuff happens first, the stuff that involves a lot of people that we want to be sharp for, that folks that are watching at home can see at the beginning of the meeting. So,
Or,
So,
Or put it in with the discussion or action items or
Yeah,
something.
yeah,
I just
I-
think,
no,
I just kind of see it go down a couple notches only because if you notice what's been pulled out is stuff that usually is discussed. I mean,
Yep.
most of it is general stuff we don't need to discuss, so.
Yeah, I mean, the hope is you don't have to pull, I mean, hope, you're not going to pull too many things, and if they do, they're relatively minor. And so I think that's when you begin to think about what you're putting on unanimous consent, that's the bigger item. It's like, that if you think it may be controversial, then it probably doesn't belong.
right.
Well, like tonight, just for example, I mean, Denise pulled out the last day of school, which makes sense because it's a topic of discussion at the end, as an action. So, I mean, I think, well, somewhere it was in there, but,
Right.
it makes sense because we just want to hear what's behind it. I know it's a 30-second discussion and then we move on. So if we put that behind that, he just would have said, what he said, and then we're done on the consent agenda. So just trying to cut a few minutes off where we can. I'm used to long meetings, but this is still good.
Well, and I would like to get to a point where things only show up on the agenda once, where we're going to talk about them.
Which is exactly what you recommended, Michael, under 8. where
Right.
We
Combining
put
the
the
action-
discussion and action items in
that's
the
good,
same
yeah.
section, because often we're having a discussion, but the motion is down
Right.
below, so I thought that was a really good idea. In terms of the unanimous consent agenda, it's really, I mean, this is new to us, so we've tried it here. We can move it if that's what the pleasure of the board is and try it there and see how it works out. It's really, I don't think there's a right or wrong. It's just a matter of getting used to it as a school system because it's not something we've done before.
I love the consent agenda item.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing it in.
But what do you think, Michael?
I would agree with moving that down to below the district reports.
You guys all okay with that? Okay. And then you'll start seeing the action item under discussion item, so that would get us to a place again in the self-reflection where Al was saying, can you put the motion that we need to do right there in the discussion? Now, I have to make a presumption of the motion, but obviously the motion has to be made, and if I've made the wrong presumption, then you just change it.
Some of them are pretty easy, like tonight, just the reminder with the opening the public hearing, closing the public hearing. It just is helpful to, while there may be a change to the motion, it just at least jogs, it gives you a basic framework. to work
Yes.
from.
I would have appreciated that.
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
All right, so do we want to vote on this tonight for first read, or do we want to see some of these changes integrated before we vote on it?
First read is.
First read?
Yeah.
And then, can we take these one at a time tonight?
Sure.
So,
So I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve BBAA School Board Member Authority for first read.
Second?
now I can't find that one in the,
I know, it should be there.
This is the one where we added the standing committees.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
an interesting
Yeah, the standing committee.
policy, but at no place does the board ever identify its own standing committees. So really, all we did was say the standing committees of the board are negotiations, policy, and finance, and those are absolutely the right standing committees that you'd want to have as a school board.
so this would be for first read tonight, and then if we approve this as is the second time, that would be the decision to add the
Yep.
finance committee as a standing committee.
Exactly.
So we have a motion and a second. Other discussion on this one?
Tom?
So all in favor of approving policy BBAA for first read, raise your hand. 7 in favor, student rep, 7 in favor, student rep in favor. That one is approved
Okay.
for first read.
So then I would like to make a motion to approve policy BDD, Board Superintendent Relationship, for first read. Oh, and that is also, wait a minute, does the BEDB go with that, or does it go with the next one?
No, just BDD.
Okay,
You have
yeah, okay, yeah, and, right, BDD for first read.
and no substantive change, it's just an
Yeah,
article.
that was no-
I'll second.
Sentence.
So we have a motion from Denise and a second from Dan. This was clerical mostly. All right, all in favor of first read approval for BDD? 7 in favor, student up in favor. That one is approved for first read. And then BEDB, the agenda preparation format.
Right, so I'll go ahead and make the motion for policy BEDB with, and that's the one with the R and R1 for first read, and that's agenda preparation format and agenda request.
And so can I just ask a question, Michael, related to the fact that this is a policy that the board discussed in workshop that they wanted changed, and given that the changes have been fed to us via the body at large, you'll hate this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Do you think you want to do a first and second read on this policy tonight so that we can start using this procedure immediately?
I actually don't, because we suggested a number of changes that were fairly small, but I think that I would like to see those integrated before we vote for second read. That's my opinion.
As I'm reading it as well, it seems that the previous version said the superintendent in consultation with the board chair and/or vice chair, and all the additions have the chair, the vice chair, and the superintendent. So it's saying that both the chair and the vice chair are involved in each of these, and I just want that to be intentional, if that's the move that we're making.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
I think the intent is exactly that, Denise, but also, should Michael have a conflict and we need to do the agenda with just Denise, it gives us the backup. If Denise can't be there, then, Michael can move forward with the agenda. It's not intended that both of them have to be there 100% of the time, but it's a recognition that it's a team effort between the chair and the vice chair.
And the superintendent.
And the superintendent.
You're not off the hook. All right, so the changes that we discussed were clerical changes in the second paragraph, the every board member paragraph in blue. We need to verify the agenda distribution in the paragraph after that.
Got it.
In the paragraph that's second from the bottom, in the all additions, deletions, and changes, we would be editing that first sentence so that it applies to the current meeting, not necessarily to a future meeting.
Got it.
And then on the dash R, we talked about moving the unanimous consent agenda below district reports. And on the dash R1, adding a related policies question and updating the financial implications to if known as a prompt. So those are my notes on what we talked about changing there. So Denise, did we have a motion?
Yeah, I made the motion,
Do we have
and
a
I don't know
second?
who's second, though.
I will second the first read for BEDB. Any other discussion? All right, all in favor for first read? 7 in favor, student up in favor. First read is approved. Any other school board committee updates?
Yeah, just building on what Jim discussed earlier about the Equity, Justice, and Anti-Racism Committee, and Jim mentioned how moving it was when Young Hong described how one of our own graduates was the subject of ignorance and hate and harassment, and what we can do about that. That was very moving. To me, it was equally moving when we talked about how to include Asian American Pacific Islander history, contributions, involvement in civil rights and social justice movements in the discussion about evolving our curriculum and sort of the competencies for our vision of a graduate, not as a sort of jostling with Black Lives Matter or other movements that have gotten more attention or activities that have gotten more attention, but really in complementing that as sort of as a variety of heads of the same monster, I guess. And it was very moving when the other members of the committee stepped forward and say, we want to help the AAPI, the Asian American Pacific Islander community, research and learn about these history and these contributions. It doesn't, all the work doesn't have to rest on you to then come forward, but we want to be a part of that from the start. And that was incredibly moving to me as as someone who didn't grow up knowing about the Asian American Pacific Islander history in the United States, because my father only spoke about China. And many of the people in our community who are immigrants drawn to UNH also don't have the sort of the knowledge and the lived experience in our own community here to be able to share these things with their own children and to bring these to the community. So really seeing it as a group effort and thanking the other members of the community. For the forum on April 25th, would like to formally invite all the board members to attend that as well, and just say that it's not a forum, it's for Asian Americans. It's a forum for our community with this as a topic. And so currently we expect to bring in a speaker or a panel to sort of talk about as the history, the contributions, the wide range of different groups within this, this racial group, and then to have a discussion again with members of the AAPI community who live in Oyster River, but hopefully with a lot of other folks who are coming to learn and to support and be part of this together. So hope to see you all there. So we haven't decided the time yet. Good question. Probably 6 o'clock, something like that.
I'll get back to you on that.
Let's get the details worked out. Would you like to give a communications committee update, or do you want? The
go ahead.
communications working group met last week and has worked through a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, blockers process about district communications. The expert portion of the committee, which means not Dan or myself, at least not myself,
Not Dan.
is working through tying those to proposed actions, and then the committee will circle back to prioritization and recommendations. That work is not going to be done by the 21st, which was the charge that we gave them. Dr. Morris, what's your read? It'll be in May.
Yes.
I don't know exactly.
I believe it'd be the first or second meeting in May.
Right. Other committee updates? All right. Public comment? Nope. Closing actions, we have future meeting dates here. The Finance Committee is meeting next Wednesday to complete the Wednesdays in March and April. We have a regular meeting on the 21st, and then the May meetings are listed there.
We have a meeting with Barrington about the lawyer. Is there a meeting on the 12th, on Monday?
Yes. We have a joint meeting with Barrington, with
Dover.
Dover.
Dover, yeah. Okay.
That is a non-meeting with council,
Okay. Mm-hmm.
is what that is. Right?
Yes.
That's at 6, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So
And that's via Zoom,
that is a
correct?
non-meeting that will be held remotely. It's not a public meeting because it is a meeting with council, with legal counsel.
Yeah.
Yes,
But
it is a remote.
It's a remote
It is a remote
meeting,
meeting.
yeah.
And the reason it's remote is Dover still meets remotely.
Yeah. So is it Zoom or Teams?
It's probably going to be Zoom.
Okay.
But I don't know for sure. It's coming from the attorney, so.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. That concludes the agenda for tonight. Is there a motion to adjourn? Motion by Al, second by Brian. All those in favor? 7 in favor, student rep in favor. We are adjourned. Thank you very much.